The complete story of Egypt. Welcome to Chronicles at Dusk, where stories whisper you to sleep. Tonight, we invite you to journey not just through time, but through the soul of a civilization that has shaped the world. Before the first pyramid touched the sky, before names were carved in stone, there was Egypt, cradled by the Nile, kissed by desert winds and guided by stars. This is a land of myth and memory, where gods walked beside kings and sand held secrets for thousands of years. From the earliest settlements to the rise and fall of empires, from the golden age of pharaohs to revolutions in modern streets, Egypt has endured. Each era a chapter, each dynasty a dream. At Chronicles at Dusk, we tell stories for gentle nights. And this evening, we share one of the longest tales ever told. So, close your eyes, breathe deep, let the river carry you. We begin where history first stirred, along the banks of the eternal Nile. The Predynastic Egypt, pre-3150 BC. There is evidence of petroglyphs along the Nile terraces and in desert oases. In the 10th millennium BC, a culture of hunter-gatherers and fishermen was replaced by a grain-grinding culture. Climate changes and/or overgrazing around 6000 BC began to desiccate the pastoral lands of Egypt, forming the Sahara. Early tribal peoples migrated to the Nile River, where they developed a settled agricultural economy and more centralized society. By about 6000 BC, a Neolithic culture had taken root in the Nile Valley. During the Neolithic era, several pre-dynastic cultures developed independently in Upper and Lower Egypt. The Badari culture and the successor Naqata series are generally regarded as precursors to dynastic Egypt. The earliest known Lower Egyptian site, Merimdi, predates the Badarian by about 700 years. Contemporaneous Lower Egyptian communities coexisted with their southern counterparts for more than 2,000 years, remaining culturally distinct, but maintaining frequent contact through trade. The earliest known evidence of Egyptian hieroglyphic inscriptions appeared during the pre-dynastic period on Naqada III, pottery vessels dated to about 3200 BC. The Dynastic Egypt, 3150–332 BC. The story of kings, pyramids, and empires begins. The early dynastic period and the Old Kingdom, the story continues, as the two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt, were drawn together like the two banks of the Nile. Around 3150 BC, a great unifier, King Menes, brought the nation into one, and with that, Egypt became a kingdom. For the next 3,000 years, a line of pharaohs would rise and fall, but Egypt always would endure. The first dynasties laid the groundwork, a society rich in tradition, art, and sacred ritual. And then came the Old Kingdom, from about 2700 to 2200 BC. This was the age of the pyramids, giants of stone built for eternity. First, Djoser's Step Pyramid at Saqqara, a bold new vision in limestone. Then, the mighty monuments of Giza, rising under the watchful eyes of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure. These pyramids stood as symbols of power, but also of something deeper, a belief in the afterlife and a longing for permanence in a shifting world. The First Intermediate Period, Middle Kingdom, and Second Intermediate Period. But as always, even golden ages must give way. Around 2200 BC, the Old Kingdom faded, and Egypt entered a time of uncertainty. This was the First Intermediate Period, a chapter of broken rule, fragmented lands, and changing tides. But the Nile kept flowing, and in time, unity returned. By 2040 BC, the Middle Kingdom had begun. Stability took root again. Pharaohs ruled with wisdom, and trade brought wealth from distant lands. Under Amenemhat III, Egypt reached new heights. Temples rose, art flourished, and life along the Nile blossomed once more. But darkness crept in again, a second wave of disunity. And with it came newcomers from the east, the Hyksos. They were migrants, speaking a Semitic tongue, bringing new tools, new animals, and a new capital, Avaris, in the Nile Delta. But Egypt would not forget her strength. From Thebes, a leader emerged, El-Sisi. He rose, he fought, and he reclaimed the land. A new age dawned, and Egypt was ready to shine brighter than ever before. The New Kingdom, Third Intermediate Period and Late Period. With Ahmose began the New Kingdom. From around 1550 to 1070 BC, Egypt's greatest age. No longer just a kingdom, Egypt became an empire stretching from the shores of Syria to the gold-rich lands of Nubia. This was the time of legends. Pharaohs like Hatshepsut, the queen who ruled as king, Thutmose III, the warrior, Akhenaten, who worshipped a single sun god, Aten. His wife, Nefertiti, known for her beauty and grace, and Tutankhamun, the boy king whose tomb would echo through history. Then came Ramesses II, the builder, the mighty, the remembered. But empires rise and fall. In time, Egypt was weakened. Libyans came, then Nubians, then the Assyrians. Foreign powers claimed the throne, but the soul of Egypt remained. Native rulers returned again, and though divided, Egypt still stood proud. The Achaemenid Rule. Then came a new wave, from even farther away. In the 6th century BC, the Achaemenid Empire, the Persians, conquered Egypt. They ruled for over a century, their kings calling themselves pharaohs. But rebellion stirred, and from within, a native prince, Emertius, rose up. Egypt was free again, if only for a little while. This would be the last time Egyptians ruled themselves in the age of the pharaohs. The Second Achaemenid Conquest. The Persians returned once more. From 343 to 332 BC, they ruled again. A brief, final hold over Egypt's ancient crown. This was the 31st dynasty, the last chapter before a new world arrived. Though the land would fall into foreign hands, the spirit of Egypt, its language, its stories, its silent stones, remained unchanged. Even as Greek, Roman, and later rulers came and went, the people of the Nile carried their memory forward, one flood at a time. Greek rule. The Ptolemaic kingdom, the winds shifted once more. From the north, across the blue waters of the Mediterranean, a new power arrived, not with chariots or papyrus, but with scrolls, columns, and stars. This was the dawn of the Ptolemaic kingdom, a Hellenistic empire born in Egypt's ancient soil. After Alexander the Great swept across the known world, his general Ptolemy stayed behind and claimed Egypt as his own. But Ptolemy did not come to erase. He came to blend. From southern Syria to the deserts of Cyrene and all the way down to Nubia, the Ptolemaic kingdom stretched far and wide. At its heart stood Alexandria, a gleaming city by the sea. Here, marble met mud brick, Greek thought met Egyptian wisdom, and cultures danced. In Alexandria's great library, 1,000 scrolls whispered secrets of science and spirit. In its lighthouse, a flame burned, guiding travelers home. Though they were Greek by blood, the Ptolemies wore the crown of the pharaohs. They wrapped themselves in linen robes, offered incense to Isis, and carved their names in hieroglyphs, as if to say, "We belong to the Nile too." But peace, as always, is fragile. Native Egyptians rose in rebellion. Civil wars tore at the kingdom's heart. Old loyalties shifted, and the sun, once high, began to set. Then came the final chapter. A queen, bold, brilliant, and remembered forever. Cleopatra. She spoke many tongues. She studied the stars. She ruled with sharp mind and softer charm. She sought alliances in a world of empires and found love in a Roman, Mark Antony. But fate was cruel. As Augustus closed in on Alexandria, the lovers knew the end had come. Antony fell by his own sword, and soon after, Cleopatra followed, a queen who chose silence over surrender. With her death, the line of the Ptolemies was broken, and Egypt became part of Rome. Yet the story didn't end. Even under new rule, Egypt's old soul endured. Greek culture still lingered in the wind, in the temples, in the streets. And the native voice, the Coptic language, echoed in prayers and lullabies for centuries to come. A land of gods, of scrolls and stone, still dreaming under desert stars. The Roman Egypt, grain, stars, and spirit. The Nile, eternal and patient, welcomed new rulers once again. Egypt, now part of Rome, became the beating heart of the empire's harvest. Fields of golden grain stretched as far as the eye could see. Papyrus rustled in the breeze. Glass shimmered like starlight. All of it flowed outward, north, east, west, from the grand port of Alexandria. This was more than a city. It was a crossroads of continents, a center of trade, a beacon of learning, a home to scholars whose names would echo for centuries. Ptolemy, mapping the heavens; Heron, inventing marvels; Hypatia, wise and fearless, teaching by candlelight in a world on the edge of change. Here, knowledge grew like reeds by the riverbank, and in quiet corners of the city, something new began to stir. The Diocese of Egypt, the Word and the Flame. In the 1st century, a whisper took root in the streets of Alexandria. It was a message of hope, of love, of a man who healed and forgave. Tradition tells us it was Mark the Evangelist who brought Christianity to Egypt. And slowly, the whisper became a voice, a movement, a church. By the time of the Emperor Diocletian, the faith had spread far, and so had fear. Many Christians faced persecution, yet still they endured. Still, they believed. The scriptures were translated into Egyptian, and when the Council of Chalcedon met in 451 AD, Egypt's own path became clear. The Coptic Church was born, distinct, rooted, proud. Even as empires shifted, the spiritual heart of Egypt beat strong. The Sassanid Conquest, a flicker in time, but peace, as always, was fleeting. In 619 AD, the Sassanid Empire swept in from the east. For 10 brief years, Egypt became Aegyptus, a Persian province under foreign rule. It was a time of tension, of waiting, of wondering what would come next. Then came an unexpected alliance. The Sassanid general Shahrbaraz joined forces with Byzantine Emperor Heraclius, and together they turned the tide once more. By 629 AD, Egypt returned to Byzantine hands. But the sands of time were shifting still, and something far greater was approaching from the desert beyond. The early Islamic Egypt, a new dawn over the Nile. The year was 641. Beneath the golden sun of the Nile Valley, the world changed once more. After centuries of Roman and Byzantine rule, the armies of the Arab Islamic Empire entered Egypt from the east. By 642, Byzantine control had faded into memory, and with it, one of the empire's greatest treasures was lost forever: Egypt, the breadbasket of empires. In the quiet that followed, a new rhythm took hold. The people, devout and practical, welcomed Sunni Islam into their lives, yet they did not abandon their past. Instead, they wove it into something uniquely Egyptian: Christian traditions, ancient rites, local beliefs whispered by elders in moonlit courtyards, all blended into a spiritual path that gave rise to the mystics of Sufi Islam, a gentle, inward-facing devotion that would flourish for centuries. In this new Egypt, the call to prayer echoed across a landscape still carrying the wisdom of the ancients. The late medieval Egypt, cities of splendor, shadows of change. Time flowed on. Caliphs rose, and rulers appointed by distant empires held sway over the land. Yet Egypt remained a jewel, its capital Cairo a beacon of power and faith. Under the Fatimid Caliphate, Cairo became the seat of the Islamic world. It was here, in stone and spirit, that the great Al-Azhar Mosque was built, a place of learning and devotion still standing today. Later came the Ayyubids and then the Mamluks, warriors of Turkic and Circassian origin who ruled not by inheritance but by strength and merit. By the 13th century, Egypt was more than a kingdom. It was a crossroads of the world, linking the Red Sea to the riches of India, Malaya, and the distant East Indies. But not all was prosperity. The Black Death swept through the land in the 14th century, and nearly half the population perished. Languages faded. Greek and Coptic gave way to Arabic. Yet the Coptic tongue, once spoken in every home, survived as a sacred language and still whispers in liturgies today. In 1517, the Ottoman Turks arrived, and Egypt became part of their vast empire. But the spirit of the land, resilient, ancient, and ever-adapting, remained untouched. The Ottoman Egypt, fading glory, shifting winds. The year was 1517. The great Ottoman Empire, under Sultan Selim III, marched into Egypt. The Mamluks, once mighty warriors and kings, were defeated. The land of the Nile became a distant province of a faraway empire. But the heart of Egypt, beating with millennia of memory, did not forget. Centuries passed. Ottoman rule grew heavy. Defenses tightened. The economy frayed. Civil society weakened, and famine stalked the fields. Between 1687 and 1731, Egypt suffered 6 great famines. In 1784, 1 in every 6 Egyptians vanished to hunger. As trade slipped into the hands of the Portuguese and the plague darkened the cities, Egypt drifted further from its former might. Then, in 1798, a young general from France arrived, Napoleon Bonaparte. With soldiers and scholars, he came to conquer and to learn. Though the French occupation was brief, it changed the world. In the sands of Rosetta, a forgotten slab of stone was found. Inscribed with ancient script, it would one day unlock the voices of the pharaohs. The Rosetta Stone and the birth of Egyptology. But the French fleet was shattered in the Battle of the Nile, and Napoleon's dreams crumbled. The Muhammad Ali Dynasty, after the French were expelled in 1801, chaos followed. The Ottomans, the Mamluks, the British, and a group of Albanian soldiers all vied for control. But out of this storm rose one man, a clever, commanding leader, Muhammad Ali, an Albanian officer in Ottoman service. By 1805, he stood alone. Though he ruled in the Sultan's name, Muhammad Ali was Egypt's true master. He founded a dynasty that would guide the country until 1952. Muhammad Ali had dreams not of tribute, but transformation. He conquered Sudan, invaded Syria, and marched into Arabia and Anatolia. But Europe grew nervous. In 1841, they forced him to give back his conquests, all except Sudan. Still, he held on to Egypt, and he modernized it. He sent Egyptian students to Europe to study science, engineering, and warfare. He brought teachers from abroad. He built factories, dug canals, and reshaped the civil service. And then came cotton. In 1820, a special kind of cotton was introduced. Long, staple, silky, and in high demand. It changed Egypt's land, its markets, and its people. Fields once used for food now bloomed with cotton for Europe. Foreign investors arrived, land ownership shifted, and Egypt became a country tied to the winds of global trade. It was a new Egypt, ambitious, outward-looking, and forever changed. The British Protectorate, 1882 to 1952, the 19th century was a time of dreams and debts for Egypt. After Muhammad Ali, his son Ibrahim, and his grandsons Abbas Mustafa Said and Ismail each ruled in turn. Abbas I was cautious, Said and Ismail were bold builders. They dreamed big, railways, palaces, and a waterway that would change the world, the Suez Canal. Completed in 1869, the canal connected the Mediterranean to the Red Sea, bringing the world closer. But building it came at a price. Egypt grew deeply in debt to European banks, and heavy taxes weighed on its people. By 1875, Ismail had to sell Egypt's 44% share in the Suez Canal to the British government. Meanwhile, he tried to expand into Ethiopia, but was twice defeated in battle. Europeans, sensing weakness, moved in. By 1879, Britain and France had installed controllers in Egypt's government, holding real power behind the scenes. At home, Egyptians grew restless. A nationalist movement arose, led by figures like Ahmad Urabi, calling for democratic reforms and control over the government's budget. In 1882, fearing the loss of their grip, Britain and France acted. They bombarded Alexandria, defeated the Egyptian army at Tel el-Kebir, and installed a new ruler, Ismail's son, Tawfiq, as a figurehead under British control. In 1914, Britain declared Egypt an official protectorate, ending Ottoman influence. The ruler's title changed from Khedive to Sultan, yet the call for independence grew louder. In 1906, the Dinshawe incident stirred many Egyptians, turning more hearts toward nationalism. After World War I, Saad Zaghloul and the Wafd Party became leaders of Egypt's nationalist movement. In 1919, when the British exiled Zaghloul and his followers to Malta, the country rose up in its first modern revolution. Protests and strikes swept the land. In response, on February 22, 1922, Britain declared Egypt independent, but only partially. Egypt drafted a constitution in 1923, based on a parliamentary system, and Zaghloul was elected prime minister in 1924. Despite hopes, Britain kept a strong influence. The 1936 Anglo-Egyptian Treaty allowed British military presence to continue, sparking tensions between nationalist forces and the monarchy. Finally, unrest and dissatisfaction led to the 1952 revolution. The Free Officers Movement forced King Farouk to abdicate in favor of his infant son, Fuad. By 1954, the British military finally withdrew, ending decades of foreign control. Egypt was poised for a new dawn. The Republican Egypt, a new dawn and troubled times since 1953. On June 18, 1953, the Egyptian Republic was born. General Muhammad Naguib became its first president. But soon, the real leader of the 1952 revolution, Gamal Abdel Nasser, rose to power. Naguib was gently removed and placed under house arrest. Nasser became president in June 1956, and in a proud moment for Egypt, British troops left the Suez Canal zone that very month. By July 26, 1956, Nasser boldly nationalized the Suez Canal, a vital artery for world trade, sparking the famous Suez Crisis. In 1958, Egypt and Syria united as the United Arab Republic, a hopeful dream of Arab unity. Though the union lasted only a few years, it marked a new chapter in regional politics. But in 1967, hardship returned. The Six-Day War saw Israel invade and occupy Egypt's Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip, territories Egypt had held since 1948. 3 years later, in 1970, President Nasser passed away. His successor was Anwar Sadat. The Sadat Era, Sadat shifted Egypt's alliances, turning from the Soviet Union towards the United States. He introduced economic reforms called the Infitah while tightening control over opposition voices. In 1973, Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack, the October War, to reclaim Sinai and the Golan Heights. Though a military stalemate, Sadat's bold move set the stage for future diplomacy. In 1977, Sadat made history by visiting Israel, a first for an Arab leader, leading to the 1979 peace treaty and Israel's withdrawal from Sinai. Though controversial and costly, this peace was embraced by many Egyptians. Tragically, on October 6, 1981, Sadat was assassinated during a military parade, and Hosni Mubarak became president. The terrorist insurgency from the 1980s through the early 2000s, Egypt faced waves of terrorist attacks. Groups like Al-Jamaa al-Islamiyya targeted not only government officials, but also civilians, tourists, and members of the Coptic Christian community. The violence severely hurt Egypt's vital tourism industry and caused widespread fear and hardship. In 1997, a brutal attack near Luxor shocked the world when gunmen killed 62 people, mostly tourists, trapping them in the ancient mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. Throughout these turbulent decades, Egypt struggled to find peace and security, a nation holding on to hope amid trials. The Revolution of 2011. By 2003, voices of change were rising in Egypt. The Kafaya movement called for democratic reforms and an end to President Hosni Mubarak's long rule. On January 25, 2011, massive protests ignited across Egypt, a wave of hope and determination. People gathered in Tahrir Square and beyond, demanding an end to Mubarak's presidency. Despite curfews and attempts to quell the unrest, the army took a cautious stance, and the power of the people proved unstoppable. On February 11, 2011, Mubarak resigned, and the military took temporary control. Cheers filled the air in Tahrir Square. A new chapter had begun. Over the following months, the constitution and parliament were dissolved, new elections were planned, and Egyptians began to shape their future. Morsi's presidency. In May 2012, Mohamed Morsi won Egypt's first democratic presidential election. He took office in June, promising change. Morsi's time in power was turbulent. He challenged the military's authority and called parliament back intercession, but the Supreme Constitutional Court blocked his move. He appointed a new cabinet, including Muslim Brotherhood members and others from the previous government. Later that year, Morsi issued a declaration to protect his decisions and the constitution drafting process. This sparked protests and deep divisions, with clashes across the country. Despite calls for national dialogue, Morsi pressed ahead with a referendum approving the new constitution in December 2012. The 2013 Coup and Aftermath. By mid-2013, millions marched against Morsi's rule. On July 3, 2013, General Abdel Fattah El-Sisi announced Morsi's removal, suspended the constitution, and appointed Adli Mansour as interim president. New elections and a revised constitution followed in early 2014. Mass trials and harsh sentences were handed down to many Morsi supporters during this period, marking a painful chapter in Egypt's recent history. The El-Sisi Era. In June 2014, Abdel Fattah El-Sisi was elected president with overwhelming support. He was sworn in on June 8th. His government focused on security, including strict controls over the Gaza border and efforts to dismantle smuggling tunnels. In 2018, El-Sisi was re-elected by a wide margin. The presidential term was extended from 4 to 6 years, and El-Sisi was allowed to run for a third term in 2024. Under his leadership, Egypt has seen a return to strong centralized control, with constitutional changes enhancing the military's role and limiting opposition. The ruling party, Nation's Future, holds a large parliamentary majority. Egypt, in regional context, during the ongoing Tigray conflict in Ethiopia 2020-2021, Egypt's concerns about regional security and water resources shaped its actions. Reports suggest Egypt monitored drone strikes from nearby bases and sought alliances to protect its interests, especially regarding the Nile and the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Egypt's story continues, a land of ancient history and modern challenges, where the people's voices rise and fall like the timeless flow of the Nile. We have reached the end of the story of Egypt. Through centuries of upheaval and renewal, Egypt's story unfolds like the gentle ebb and flow of the Nile, rich, resilient, and timeless. From ancient pharaohs to modern republics, its land carries the echoes of countless souls who shaped its destiny. As the sun sets on this chapter of history, may the lessons of endurance, hope, and transformation inspire us all to embrace our journeys with patience and grace. Thank you for joining me on Chronicles at Dusk. Until our next story, may peace and curiosity light your way.